On Netflix, streaming right now is a documentary called Elway. Guess who this is about?
Oh.
Yeah. Hall of Famer John Elway joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show. Great to see you, John.
Rich, great to see you.
Look at you, man. Look at you. The Duke is on my screen right now. It's so cool. Let's just jump into the here and now before we hit the Wayback Machine. Your 2 cents on what we're seeing out of the Broncos, and obviously they just got hit in the mouth by the Jaguars. What do you think, John?
You know what? They've had a great year. You know, they won 11 in a row, and they came in, and Jacksonville played great. You got to hand it to them. And I think that, you know, it's at the time now that, you know, they still control their own destiny, and they've got 2 left. And so, you know, you never like to lose football games, but sometimes, you know, this might be a good thing for them. You never know. But I think that, you know, they've had a tremendous year, and, you know, they got a short week, got to get refocused going into Kansas City. But, you know, I think they have as good a chance as anybody. And, you know, they've won a lot of tight games. They've come back several times in the fourth quarter. So I like the football team. I like what they're doing, and I think Bo's had a great year. And I like what Bo just said, and the fact that you know, you get hit in the mouth sometimes, and sometimes it wakes you up a little bit, and it might have been a good thing.
Well, I mean, you also know what it looks like to have a defense potentially help the Broncos ride to a championship, you know, 10 years ago, right? I mean, like, and it's in the same spot as Super Bowl 50, this year's Super Bowl 60, John.
Yeah, so you hope that helped for sure. But, you know, I think the key thing, Rich, is they control their own destiny. And if they win those next 2, obviously they got the Chargers coming in the last week, and there's going to be a lot on the line there. So it'll be an exciting finish.
Are you seeing any similarities between that Super Bowl 50 team that you put together, John, and the one that's being put together for a Super Bowl 60 run? Do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think because, you know, Super Bowl 50, you know, we were so good on the defensive side, and, you know, I think we were 19th in the league in offense. But, you know, one key factor we had there was we had the Peyton Manning factor there, and the fact that, you know, anytime he was on the field, everybody thought we could win a football game. And so I just, you know, they're still playing great defense. I think the offense has come a long way. I think Bo's got better week in and week out. He's still young and still makes some mistakes, but I think that, you know, he's got the potential to be a great one in this league for a long time. And you know, the experience he's getting is great. And so, you know, the next 2 weeks are 2 big weeks for him. And I'm sure that, you know, they'll come out and play well. But I think, you know, to me, when I look back, I think this team's probably a little more well-rounded than we were, in the fact that, you know, offensively, I think they're a little more explosive than we were.
Isn't that interesting? Because obviously Peyton Manning neck up, can't get any better than that. We also know, obviously, his physical status, if you will, for in that Super Bowl 50 year. Your conversations with Nix, have you had any at all, John?
No, I haven't. You know, I've had a chance to meet him a couple times, spend a little bit of time around him, but haven't had a chance to spend a whole lot of time around him. But, you know, I like everything that he's about, you know, and he continues, he's a great competitor, and he continues to get better week in and week out. I think, you know, and I really think Sean Payton's done a heck of a job. To me, you know, it's amazing that he's not mentioned a lot about, you know, Coach of the Year, but I think Sean's done a tremendous job with that football team in a short period of time. And, you know, the mindset's right, and the fact that every game they go into, they believe they can win.
When you dead cap somebody to the tune of $85 million, like they did with Russ, right, and then you have to draft a quarterback and go with him, and he winds up being the 6th quarterback in the first 12 picks of a first round, you're like, uh-oh, how are you going to win in his first contract, which is what you want to do in this day and age? Certainly when you're paying another person franchise quarterback money to not play for you, and they've won 22 times, and they can be the 1 seed this year. You know? Absolutely.
You know, and I think that, you know, to win 11 games in a row in this league is very, you know, very, very difficult. It doesn't happen very often. I think, you know, and you know, what I'm impressed with was, you know, with Bo's maturity. I think, you know, when you play, like the experience he had coming out of college, when he played 62 college football games, I think that's a big, big help when you come into the NFL and having that experience and that maturity level. And I think we've seen that in the first 2 years with Bo, and it's just going to continue to get better and better.
All right, let's hit some of the Wayback Machine, John, slowly but surely. John Elway here in support of Elway, streaming now exclusively on Netflix, directed by Ken Rogers, who is truly one of the greatest in the history of NFL films. Is exactly the sort of guy that you'd want to have directing your documentary and this Netflix special. John Elway here on the Rich Eisen Show. Your conversation with Peyton Manning when you first connected with him and he was no longer a Colt, what was that conversation, Elway to Manning, like, John?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, the key thing for me, because I think there was 4 other teams involved, and I just wanted to show him what Denver was all about, what the Broncos were all about, show him the organization. And I think that, John Fox was our head coach, who was, a very, great guy, great coach, and won a lot of football games with Mike McCoy being the offensive coordinator. So I think it was to show him what we're all about, because we knew, it wasn't going to be a hard sell for us. It was going to lay out what we had, what we could provide for him, allow him to come in here and really be involved in what he'd done in the previous 14 years or 13 years in the league, and to be able to adapt the offense to what he was comfortable doing. And so we were able to do that. And I think, Peyton was, he's a guy that is going to make his own decisions. And it was, I didn't want to put a hard sell on him. I just wanted to have him feel welcome, and also just show every good thing that we had about the Denver Broncos. Obviously, I'm biased, having played for him for 16 years and been in the front office with him. And so I just want to show him what Denver was all about, what the Broncos were all about, what the coaching staff and everything was all about, and let him make that decision and try not to pressure him. We didn't want to pressure him at all, and I think that was the key thing.
When did you find out that it was done?
He actually called me. I got a call from him, and I was sitting at my desk, and he said, "Well, I'm making some phone calls, letting everybody know what I'm going to do." And I was wondering if I was the first call, the second call, or the third call.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I was the third call, and he told me that he was going to come and join us here in Denver, which was obviously. And John Fox was sitting right next to me, and we both gave the touchdown sign when he said that. And we're thrilled to have him, and obviously, finished his career on a great note, on a tremendous career that he did have.
So he called and offered regrets before he called and confirmed, is what you're saying?
He did, and so that's where I was wondering. As soon as he said that, I was wondering, which number call are we? And so, and I think the one team that I was really concerned about was Tennessee, just because of his history in Tennessee and having been down there. But I think that Peyton realized, the best fit was here for him in Denver, and it turned out that way.
All right, let's hit the Wayback Machine now for real. I want your favorite Pat Bolen story, John Elway. Give me your
Pat Bolen.
Yes.
I wish I had a favorite one. There's so many of them, but I think the one thing about Pat Bolen that I love so much is that he was such a player's owner. I mean, he was at practice every single day. He was a great competitor, competing in the Ironman, and he'd work out at 3:00 every afternoon on the button and never missed a day. But just, he was a great competitor and really cared about his players. What the great thing with Pat was because he had a place in Hawaii. And so every time we'd go over to the Pro Bowl, I think, Pat would host us over there and take us to his house and take us out to dinner. And he really allowed us to get to know him and the type of guy that he was, which, obviously was a guy that wanted to win, and every resource he could throw at winning, he would throw at winning.
So how difficult was it for him to not win the big one for as long as you guys were chasing it together, John?
Well, I think it was probably just as hard on him as it was on me, because I think that's what he wanted is, he wanted that world championship. And, especially in the 80s when we were there 3 times and, didn't play well in those Super Bowls and ended up losing. That was 8 years before we had a chance to go back. So, he was working as hard as anybody trying to get us back, get us back to the Super Bowl and get the right people in, on the coaching staff as well as the players. And it was just, a great guy and a guy that, is dearly missed every day.
So, in the times I've been so fortunate to interview and chat with somebody like you or somebody on your status of Mount Rushmore like you, Joe Montana, I've talked to him about his famous drive in the Super Bowl to beat the Bengals, and how he mentioned he saw John Candy before he took the huddle. What was your mind like taking the huddle to start the drive, John?
Well, it's funny. That was, in Cleveland, and it was cold, and it'd been a battle the whole day, and we went down 20-13, and then we fumbled the kickoff, and so thank God we were on the open end in old Cleveland Municipal rather than in the dog pound. Otherwise, we'd have been getting killed with dog
Biscuits.
bones and those type of things.
Yeah,
But
right.
it was funny that we're sitting there, and the one thing that I remember about it was just we had 5 minutes to go. Was just saying, okay, let's get some room, let's get some operating room because we're on the 2-yard line, and so we got some operating room. But we're standing in the huddle before on a TV timeout, and our right guard, Keith Bishop, who was a good friend of mine and a good buddy and now still works for the Broncos, we're standing there and no one's kind of talking. We're just kind of thinking what we have to do. And then Bish finally looks at me. He says, Wood, he says, we got him right where we want him. And sure enough, he was dead right. And, and the thing is about that drive is once we got some room, we continued to pick up momentum, and that stadium kept getting quieter and quieter. And then when we picked up to 3rd and 17, we felt pretty good about where we were and we were able to get it. We still knew we had to score a touchdown, but I think with 5 minutes to go, it wasn't something that we thought this was our last chance.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting some breathing room first, but then as we got the breathing room and then we got the momentum, and I think that momentum of scoring, right before the end of regulation, we had that going into OT, and we're able to, win that game in OT.
John Elway here on the Rich Eisen Show. What was your first conversation with Mike Shanahan like? What was that like?
He was, he was a young guy. Now, whether
Right.
it was he came in as, the quarterback coach in 1984, I grew to love him as a coach. Then he left a couple times, came back once, and then left again to the Niners, and then. There was nobody more thrilled when Mr. Bolen hired Mike to come back as a head coach, because I knew he's just coming off a Super Bowl win, been in San Francisco for 3 years, had great success there, was so excited that I really felt like we had a chance to go back to, and compete for Super Bowls again. And so, I gave him a big hug when he came back, and we were able to get it done.
Okay. And so when did you know this was for real? Whose arrival was it? Whose drafting was it? Or even in the case of Rod Smith, obviously not drafted. Who was it, John? What do you think?
Well, I mean, other than Mike, I think the key addition for us was Terrell Davis. I mean, it was something that, and Mike, was a guy that, worked on the running game. And, we had the zone scheme, which really worked well. And we drafted Terrell in the 6th round, and, he got him. And Terrell was probably the guy that really kind of helped us turn the whole thing around to where now all of a sudden we were going to be able to be balanced on the offensive side. And then, and so then Terrell came in, and, it's funny, Terrell, we were in preseason and we're over in Japan. We were playing preseason game over in Japan. And Terrell was saying, he was like the 7th one on the depth chart and wasn't getting a lot of reps. And so he was like, man, I'm done with this. He went downstairs, tried to check out because he was going to go home to say he didn't want to play football. Mm-hmm. And thank God they couldn't understand him in Japan. They couldn't understand what he wanted. So he had to go back up to his room. The next day he plays in the game in the special teams.
That's right.
Played a little bit running back, but in the special teams he ran down, made a big hit. And then guys started getting hurt. Terrell moved up the line fast. And then Mike went to him the first game and said, Terrell, you're going to be our starter. And then, that's when things really started to move forward for us.
So are you saying Terrell Davis might not be in the Hall of Fame and you might not have 2 rings if he was fluent in Japanese? Is that what you just told me, John?
Oh, yeah. We talk about that all the time. It's like, thank God they could not understand you. And you hung in there and came back and played the game the next night. So, but yeah, that's a story that's one of those forks in the road.
Yep.
That we got lucky on the fork in the road, and positive circumstances helped us out quite a bit there.
Wow. In the couple minutes I have left with you, John, a couple more questions for you. Not to equate what I do for a living with what you did for a living as a player, but I'll see some old Sports Center moments for me with hair, and I'm like, it doesn't even where I'm like, I don't recognize that person, right? Like it's a different life. What is it like for you to watch that helicopter spin in the Super Bowl back now, whenever you see it, John?
Rich, I will tell you this. It's like I still get emotional every time I see that, because I remember. And the funny thing about that play was I didn't like to play, and Mike knew I didn't like to play, and we talked about it, and he goes, I said, what if we don't get this defense? He says, John, 100% of the time this whole year with against this formation, we get this play and we get this coverage. And so sure enough, we walk out and it's not that coverage. And I tried to get outside and, tried to find somebody open and look for the first down. And, I was able to turn it upfield. And I said, well, I'm going to put my big old 6-inch vertical on him and try to go over the top. But the thing that really sticks out to me is I remember looking at our sideline when I got up because I full of adrenaline as well. And I looked at our sideline and our sideline was going nuts. And so that feeling at that time, I still to this day, and even when I watch the Netflix show, it's like it still grabs me because we'd worked so hard. It was my 15th year. We'd had those 3 disappointing losses, and in Colorado, and the Bronco fans so dearly wanted a Super Bowl victory, and so it is very emotional still when I watch that play.
And then just while we're in the emotions right now and the feels, John, what were you stunned, surprised, taken aback when Pat Bolen said this one's for John and handed you the trophy, John?
I was because I was felt a little bit because I threw for 140 yards that game, but I think that learning, having lost 3 Super Bowls and knowing how important it is to have a great football team, that to be able to win a Super Bowl, you have to have a great football team. But for him to kind of put me out there in front, it was obviously very, very nice and a great feeling. But I was also sitting there thinking, well, thank God I had those other 52 guys because we couldn't have done it without each other.
And then you obviously had the opportunity to return the favor the next year. Was that off the top of your head, or you're like, if we win this, I'm going to say this one's for Pat and hand him?
That was actually in Super Bowl 50 when we were in Santa Clara.
That's right. Okay.
And
right.
So, yeah, I was just thrilled
right.
I got the opportunity to say it back to him. And, and that's when Mr. Bolen was starting to slide a little bit. So hopefully he remembered that and was able to appreciate that too.
John, you're the man. Really appreciate the 2 cents. Congrats on the doc. Did you have to have your arm twisted to do this? Your family do it? What happened?
No, I think it. I really think because I didn't do any of the other ones, and I knew that I was retired because I have the opportunity to do something like that when my career was over in football, and so the timing was right. But also, it was I've got 11 grandkids, and it's like you can have books and kids can read books, but I think it's for my grandkids to kind of see what my legacy is and see me as as a football player and what I did as a football player. I think that was the main reason. Plus my kids were kind of young too. And so they really enjoyed it too, because they really didn't know everything that was going on at the time. So it was really kind of for my family and ultimately for hopefully the Bronco fans out there that will enjoy it. And also, for me to open up a little bit more in the fact that, you're always kind of closed off when you're playing and having to be tough and doing those type things. So, it's a little intimidating sometimes to let them a little closer. And I think that this documentary kind of shows a little bit more what I'm about.
Well, John, I appreciate the time. And what you just said, though, did spur one more question for you. When you said 11 grandkids, reminds me of Philip Rivers' immediate family. And that he's playing tonight on Monday Night Football at age 44. What's your 2 cents on seeing Philip Rivers do this right now, John?
I tell you what, that is impressive. I'll tell you what, at 44. And the funny thing, though, Rich, it's funny, and I retired at 38. Mm-hmm. Really, until you always think you can play, right? And so, it's impressive what he's doing. Obviously, he's done a great job staying in shape, and I think he's coaching the football team, so he's on the football field, and I'm sure he's throwing the ball around, so he was ready for the opportunity. But I also think that that's kind of Philip's attitude, and the way that he played is that he's a great competitor and wanted another opportunity. So I'm happy for him, and hopefully that continues and they can get in the playoffs with
How often did you get calls to say, are you done for sure? When was the last time you got a call saying, let's play, John? What about that? Seriously.
Well, it's been a while. It's funny, Rich. As soon as I hit 60, this body started to go a lot faster. So, You know, that the elbow doesn't straighten out as much as it used to, and the shoulder doesn't work too much because I know the next morning if I throw it too much, I'm not going to be able to lift it over my head. So I'm careful with what I do when it comes down to throwing it.
But did you get calls like when you were 40, 41,
Oh,
42? No. Never?
No.
Did you never get a call at all when you were done? Not even the Broncos never called you?
No.
Would you have done it? Would you have done it?
I would have definitely thought about it for sure, but I'm not sure if I'd have done it or not.
John, you're the man. Thanks for the time. Always appreciate it. Never take it for granted. Thank you.
Rich, thank you very much, and hope you have a happy holidays and a happy new year.
You too. That's John Elway, Pro Football Hall of Famer, first ballot, right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Elway, available now for streaming exclusively on Netflix. Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app, 12 to 3 Eastern.